Okay, welcome. This is time for leading the conversation. Um, my name is Warren Boykin. I'm the Program and Outreach Coordinator for NAMI Northern Illinois, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our topic today of mindful self-compassion with our speaker, Nicole Didier, LCSW, and psychotherapist at Forest City Counseling. Um, a little bit of background on Nicole. As a licensed clinical social worker, Nicole has passion and experience working alongside youth, adults, and couples in navigating their mental health. Areas of focus include depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, victims of domestic violence, children, whether youth or adult, of divorce, and recovery from addiction. Nicole graduated from George Williams College of Aurora University during the first peak of the coronavirus in May of 2020. She soon dove into serving clients within the Rockford area through working with Forest City Counseling, a local domestic violence agency, and within the foster care system, serving as a qualified mental health professional. She now serves as a full time psychotherapist at Forest City Counseling. Before entering the world of social work, she served for 10 years in various youth ministry settings. Nicole is married and enjoys getting to spend time wakeboarding, snowboarding, laughing, being creative with her husband, and spending time with her cats who rule her home. Through our presentation this afternoon, our hope is that we all can gain an understanding about what mindful self compassion is, what it isn't, and the impact it can have, and how we can practice self compassion in small moments throughout every day that has a long term impact. Before we get started, I'd also like to mention that since this is a webinar, um, we will be taking your questions um, normally at the end of the presentation. You can type them into the Q&A or the chat box. We prefer the Q&A box, but I know people often are more familiar with the chat. So um, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Nicole Didier.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody who has joined in and taking time out of your day to be here and to learn a little bit more of something that I am extremely passionate about. And I think that is super, super important, whether we're looking at mental health or self-care or leadership, no matter what area that we look at, that self-compassion can easily apply. And so when I was asked just about different various topics, I was like, this is one that needs to be discussed. And so very excited. And I'll use, so there it's mindful self-compassion, but I'll use it interchangeably with self-compassion as well. And we'll get into that in a little bit here as to why that is. And so first I wanted to start with giving you the definition of self-compassion. And so Kristen Neff is the founder of Mindful Self-Compassion, of the book Self-Compassion, and define self-compassion as treating yourself with the same kindness, care, understanding that you would offer to a good friend when facing difficulties or personal shortcomings. And to dive into some Latin today, with which is the C-O-M, the first part of compassion, and suffering, passion, you have compassion. So with suffering is what compassion is when we extend it to other people. And the first step in experiencing compassion, when we look at extending compassion to other people before we even get into the self piece, is being able to actually notice that someone is struggling or feeling bad about themselves or bad about a situation. The second step is to recognize the suffering, right? Like being able to note it and say, hey, like I see that you're struggling. I see this is really hard for you. So the suffering, the failure, the imperfection, and that they're a part of the shared human experience. And then the third step is to respond to the person with warmth, understanding, and kindness. And so when we add that small word in front of compassion and we have self compassion, it's exactly what this phrase says, it's compassion towards the self. And so it's not only acknowledging the struggle or the suffering, it's supporting yourself in the moment rather than pushing it away, ignoring it, putting a silver line around it, etc. We do a very, very good job of being able to do that to ourselves. And there's so many pieces that go into it that I don't want to jump in and so or jump ahead. And so what I would like to do now is for us to get kind of the groundwork, the elements of self-compassion, or I like to say pillars for some reason, but the pillars of self-compassion. And when you think about a pillar, it's what holds, right? Like a structure together, a house, the front of a house, a deck, or something like that, it's very strong and it's steady. And so these three components are extremely, extremely important when we look at self compassion, and we're able to understand by looking at these elements. And so the first one is self kindness, and self kindness is in the place of self judgment. And so being kind to ourselves when we suffer, when we fail, or when we feel inadequate, that this is done through warmth and support towards ourselves, where we are able to encourage and empower ourselves like a good friend or a good mentor would. As we've talked about, there's going to be a lot of repetition, a lot of reiteration. And I think it's important because this concept in my own life, first and foremost, I make myself kind of a research subject when I'm learning different things to see how it lands for me. And then I will then do it with clients as well. And so we do a lot of repetition, a lot of going back to some of these pieces, because while when we experience self-compassion, and we'll have an opportunity later to do that, I'll lead us through some exercises. Um, our brain really struggled to compute of what it means to be kind to ourselves. And so it's because the opposite of self-compassion is self-judgment, right? It leads us to ignore, to invalidate, or even make fun of our own struggle in a way that tends to be cold or harsh. Or a lot of us, myself included, like to utilize humor. I don't know if anyone else can identify with that, when in reality, it's masking judgment. And so this self-kindness helps to counteract that. And the filter that I want to emphasize, underline, bold, red letters is that it's being able to do this practice of self-kindness with warmth, and I would even add patience and into it as well, right? Because when we slow things down, it allows us to be in connection with ourselves, where when we're judgment, right, we can snap from one thing to the next, where with self-kindness we're slowing it down. And then the second piece is common humanity, and this is in place of isolation. To put it simple, reminding ourselves that we're not alone. A way that I love to approach it is that right now, in this moment, there's probably one, if not many people in your world that are suffering right now, yourself included. However little or much suffering you're experiencing right now, and as you notice, I'm slowing it down, that right now, in this moment, at 12:09 on June 19th, 2025, people are suffering to some extent. It's a way for us to feel connected in what it means to be part of the human experience. This also has shown to make mindful self-compassion more approachable because the focus isn't solely on us, right? Which a lot of people struggle with in their healing journey, that it's a lot easier for us to focus on other people's pain. I've seen a lot of memes going around, especially for therapists, of I probably needed a hug, so I went and got my therapist degree instead. Or I probably needed a hug and I went and helped someone else instead. Right. And so this kind of helps to bring perspective of being able to acknowledge your own struggle. You could use struggle, you could use pain in place of suffering. Suffering is just the main phrase that you'll see in mindful self-compassion. And but being able to acknowledge your own pain at the same time of being able to know at this very moment someone else is even if it's something that's completely different, but someone else that I know and I love and I don't know are experiencing some type of pain or suffering right now. And common humanity also helps us to combat the common struggle that we feel as if we're the only one in a moment of struggle. It's so hard to see the bigger picture when we feel, whether it's like, I feel like no one understands what I'm going through, or no one has been through this before. Like some of those are more extreme examples, but we all know what it's like to feel like we're not understood. We all know what it's like to, while the intention is great. This gets into, I had mentioned silver lining earlier. And a great way to like know what that is well, at least you have this, or at least this happened, or at least this didn't happen. Common humanity, we're not putting a silver lining on it. We're sitting in the pain, we're sitting in the suffering with other people, whether it's in the actual physical vicinity of someone or simply just mentally, as I had you do, think about someone else right now that you know is suffering, and how that can bring us that second tenet of common humanity, bring us together, and again, of making the overall concept of self-compassion a little bit more approachable. And so when we're able to know that we're not alone, it also helps us then to work on or work towards being kind towards ourselves. And then the third piece of mindful self-compassion is mindfulness, which is in place of over identification. So mindfulness is being present in this moment as it's happening, taking each moment as it comes, as it goes, distractions coming and going. And I utilize the analogy of like a leaf floating in the wind. You're literally just watching it come across your face, watching it pass you by, maybe float to the ground, or maybe to continue its journey. But simply just letting yourself be mindful of what is happening moment to moment. And the key part, and this is my own definite, or within my own definition of mindfulness as I've been working with myself and working with clients, is without judgment. And that is extremely difficult, right? Going back to that piece of the self-kindness versus the self-judgment. This is where you kind of see, if you're catching it, there's those webs of all of these three pieces together that overlap into different parts of self-compassion. And there's something beautiful when we're able to have a balance of these three. And in mindful self-compassion, mindfulness, specifically mindfulness, allows us to turn towards our pain in the moment as it is happening. An example, being able to say to ourselves, I am experiencing a moment of suffering right now, and this really sucks. Or I am really struggling with how I'm feeling right now, and it simply just feels like a lot. It's a lot to feel this right now. There's no response. There's no expectation. There's no solution, nothing to do, nowhere to be, but simply just being able to acknowledge it, which a lot of people find annoying, right? Because it's like, I want to have solutions. I want to do something with it. And what I tell all of my clients when we're talking about this is that while it might not seem productive, simply acknowledging and engaging with your pain is being productive. And two phrases that come from both self-compassion, and I've also seen it in some of my training with emotion focused therapy, is what you feel you can heal, what you name, there's actually three, what you name you can tame, but what you resist will persist. So what you feel you can heal, what you name you can tame, and what you resist will persist. And so mindfulness really helps us to be able to lean in, even if it's not engaging with the emotional piece, but it's naming it. I do this all the time in sessions, and I'll check in with clients right after we do it. Like, and sometimes it's like it doesn't do anything, or it's worse, or just as bad. But the majority of the time, when I have a client just simply name their pain, name the situation that's going on, even just being able to say, like, I am suffering right now. Right now, this situation sucks and it's really hard. Just even being able to verbalize that, I'll have my client check in with their body, usually their heart, their head, their stomach, and usually, not every time, those symptoms will reduce. There wasn't any solution that was discovered, there wasn't any problem that was solved, but simply being productive by naming the pain, naming the struggle, naming the suffering. And when we're able to be present with our pain, Dr. Neff discusses that it helps us to get a better perspective. of the pain that we're feeling. And it also keeps us from over identifying with our thoughts and feelings, which that tends to lead us to react, right? If we're over identifying with our feelings, you see this especially with anxiety, is trying to control the situation and figure out, what am I going to do? That's what our brain is trying to do. Its goal is to be helpful. But any of us who struggle with anxiety or anxiety symptoms know that at the end of it, it's making things worse. Our heart starts to pound, our heart rate goes up, we might get hot, our thoughts start to swarm around or maybe loop around, and we're just trying to get a sense of what's going on. But this is what happens when we over identify with our experience, with our emotions, with our thoughts. We're simply being able to say, I'm feeling anxious right now. I'm very anxious right now. And this sucks. This is painful. This isn't awesome. Right? But then when we pull these together, we'll use that as an example of being able, and it's not, step one is self-kindness, step two is common humanity, step three is mindfulness. We're going to start with mindfulness. And, I am feeling anxious right now. I'm very overwhelmed, and I feel helpless. I just don't know what to do. And then practicing that common humanity of right now, in this moment, reminding myself that I bet there's at least one other person that I know or somewhere in this world, whether it's a mile or 10,000 miles from me, knows what it feels like to feel anxious or is feeling anxious right now. And being able to think about them and think about not being alone, and then being able to turn to the self and go, this is really hard. Like, anxiety is not an easy thing to feel, no matter how long or how little you've dealt with it. It's very hard to deal with. And so we see, I don't know if you could feel it or sense it, but when we bring these three pieces together, there's this beautiful grounding that happens. And I'll get to what compassion isn't in a bit, and this ties into also the dramatic impact that self-compassion can have. But before that, I thought I would share I was trying to think, I was like, wanted to share my passion around self-compassion and mindful self-compassion and where this comes from. And I could have gone so many different directions. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to pull up the book. I'm going to share some of the most influential quotes that I read in the book and that I reflect on a like semi-regular basis. And but before that, kind of like where this all came to be. So I was introduced to self-compassion first through Brene Brown. I feel like that is a very familiar name in the mental health community, nearly a decade ago when I was interning, which led to me reading Kristen Neff's book, Self-Compassion, where I legitimately think I highlighted almost the entire book, and I started using sticky notes just to kind of separate, because I started getting overwhelmed about the different pieces that I wanted to remember. And since then, since about 20, so it'll be 2018, 29, or like 2019, fall of 2019 into 2020. After that, it led me to doing training in mindful self-compassion, which led to mindful self-compassion core skills workshop, which led to mindful self-compassion intensive training I did a couple summers ago. And then there was an offshoot of fierce self-compassion. And then I recently wrapped up two different sections, so 20 weeks in total of self-compassion and psychotherapy. And so they call it the SKIP program. And so I love this. I don't know if that makes it evident that I have paid lots of money and I've put lots of hours into just the training because of the impact and the effectiveness, and yet the simplicity of it. And so I would say the largest impact, though, is being able to slow myself down. And if you notice, I've done a couple of presentations for NAMI before on ADHD and anxiety, and this one, like, I really even noticed that, like, I'm slowing down and I'm doing this. And so even in my presentation, there's impact that I hope is felt and seen, because especially in presentations, I feel like it can just be like trying to figure out how to get through everything. And so I really wanted to be intentional to model self-compassion in this presentation. And so, yeah, so let's jump into some of the quotes that have been the most impactful, that I hope are inspiring and impactful for you as well. And so we'll take it piece by piece. So the first piece being self-kindness. And Kristen Neff talks about how if you are continually judging and criticizing yourself while trying to be kind to others, you are drawing artificial boundaries and distinctions that only lead to feelings of separation and isolation. Kind of let that sit for a minute, right? Like, you're fighting yourself, really. It's like you can be kind to other people, and I think there is this alarm in our minds and in our bodies that like we know when how we're treating ourselves compared to how we treat other people. And yeah, but then that's where like what she talks about, it leads to us like pulling away from others or feeling as if we're on the outskirts, or like when we're so hard on ourselves that we don't feel worthy of other people, that we, without even realizing it, create this self-fulfilling prophecy, and before we know it, we've isolated ourselves and created that ourselves, which is really, really hard. And then the second quote, we cannot be moved by our own pain if we don't even acknowledge that it exists in the first place. And this is getting into emotional intelligence. And what I've learned is you have this quadrant. And so the top left is self-awareness, right? Which in this case is being able to acknowledge your pain, being aware of your pain, right? Being self-aware of your pain. And then the second quadrant is the self-management, right? So what you do once you become aware of your pain and your suffering, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to be kind to yourself or attempt to be kind to yourself? Are you going to be judgmental towards yourself? Are you going to, there's so many different outcomes, and clients and I talk a lot about like I'd almost rather not be self-aware if I'm struggling with self-management, because I can be aware of what's going on, but then if I don't know what to do or I'm struggling to know what to do with it, it makes it very, very challenging. So that's where self-kindness can come in, and being able to learn and be in tune. And something that was reiterated over and over and over and over and over again in the trainings that I've done is being able to be your own best teacher. And that is the what I now lead my counseling practice with. I want my clients to be their own best teachers. Because if you're coming up with the answers and you're being able to understand, for example, how to be kind to yourself, how you are kind to yourself is going to be different than someone else who's in this webinar, someone else in your life. How I'm going to be kind to myself is going to be different. And so that's where being your own best teacher is extremely important. And then common humanity. The very fact that we are imperfect affirms that we are card-carrying members of the human race and therefore always automatically connected to the whole. And then we are the expression of millions of prior circumstances that have all come together to shape us in this present moment. And this third one I'll get into here in a minute, but I want to make sure that we're having time and being able to keep a good pace. So when wrongdoers are treated with compassion rather than harsh condemnation, cycles of conflict and suffering can be broken. That one was a hard one for me to reflect on. And I'm sure for many of you, when you read that, when you think about the state of how things are right now in our nation alone, let alone the world now, even 5 years, 10 years, right? When we look at it through this piece, right? And especially through that key word of wrongdoers, right? Like that can mean so many different things, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit trail at all, right? But however that's landing for you, I'm going to read it again. When wrongdoers are treated with compassion rather than harsh condemnation, cycles of conflict and suffering can be broken. And I think a piece of this that makes this so impactful is the amount of work and the amount of effort that this takes. Not just in like hard work and buckling down, but the intentionality of being able to look or think about someone, think about someone who has done wrong in your life or you have done wrong in their life. And then also look at it through the lens of that they, like everybody else, are a card-carrying member of the human race, still means that we are connected to the whole. And it's also important, and this is in a different topic of fear, self-compassion, of being able to look at boundaries and limits and and what that looks like. It's also important. It's not sitting here saying, oh, well, because they're a card carrying member of society, I just let it slide. No, then we're getting self compassion wrong. We're getting common humanity wrong. At the same time, and this is me preaching to the choir here and talking to myself, the moment that we stop seeing someone as a human being is when we stop being able to extend self-compassion or being able to extend compassion. And it makes it that much more challenging for than us to be able to extend compassion to ourselves. And so I thought about not incorporating that quote, but I thought that it was very important and pertinent and felt very led to do that. And so um, however that hits for you, I hope that it is encouraging more than anything else, and just really bringing together what self-compassion is, looking at it through the lens of common humanity. And then finally is mindfulness. And we need, so a couple quotes, slow it down again, that we need to stop for a breath or two and acknowledging that we're having a hard time and that our pain is deserving of a kind, caring response. Otherwise, suffering will go unattended and feelings of stress and worry will only mount. And the past doesn't exist except in our memories, and the future doesn't exist except in our imagination. Rather than being lost in our train of thought, therefore, we can take a step back and say, ah, this is what I'm thinking, feeling, and experiencing right now. We can awaken to the reality of the present moment. And to add on to that of not looking behind, not looking towards the future, but simply being here in this moment as it's happening, as it continues without judgment. And so I thought it would be good to get into what self-compassion is not. Self-compassion is not self-esteem. Self-esteem is really dependent on how things are going in life. And this is something that I learned in like my very first training with self-compassion with Kristen Neff. It's, she uses kind of this gauge, like gas gauge or barometer, and talks about how, when life is going good and people we're vibing, we're doing well, like work is going well, right? That self-esteem is going to go up. Right. But as soon as you start to feel isolated or pulled away, things they aren't going so great. Like other situations are coming in, our self-esteem is going to tank. Where self-compassion, no matter the life circumstances of what is going on in our lives, whether good or bad, that when we're able to practice those tenets of self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness, no matter what is happening, we can stay steady in our self-compassion, right? Not necessarily super high, not super low, but it's not dependent on how life is going. And so I think that's super, super important to be able to know. And then self-compassion is not a Zen state, granola, or woo-woo. While there can be some of those pieces that are a part of it, it really comes down to being able to be your own best teacher and what that looks like. Uh, so yes, these parts can be part of self-compassion, but I think also too, when we utilize these phrases, it can discredit just how incredible self-compassion is. And the reason I say that is because even on her website, Kristen Neff's website, and also Mindful Self-Compassion, there are over a decade's worth of peer-reviewed research that has been done to show and display the effectiveness of self-compassion, of mindful self-compassion. So not only other practices and resources to be able to get a deeper understanding of what it is, but also the time and the effort and the energy and the money that has gone into research to show the effectiveness of self-compassion. It is also not feeling sorry for yourself, feeling pity for yourself, or excusing bad behavior. It's being present with your pain and your suffering, but also not weaponizing it, I feel like is the best way to describe it. It's being able to be present, to acknowledge it, and to also figure out how you need to respond rather than react to the emotion that is coming up. or the experiences that need to be processed, but being able to do that uh, in a self-kind, mindful, common, humane way. And then the fourth piece, which I think is the hardest, that right when anytime you put the word self or mine or me, it can come across selfish, right? Where self-compassion is the opposite. It makes it possible for us to be able to love and to care and extend compassion to those that we interact with on a regular basis. And so, getting into the impact of self compassion, it gives us the ability to practice self care without the guilt. When one is able to practice self compassion, we're able to realize that we are, as you hear when you are on an airplane, to put the mask on yourself before you put it on anybody else. Because what good is it if you aren't giving yourself that air and you are struggling? How can you then turn to someone else and help them? Or the analogy of pouring from an empty vessel, right? Like once you've poured out all that you've had, not even if there's anything left for you, but you can't keep pouring out if there's nothing in there. And so self-compassion can help to fill that so that you can love and be there for other people. The helpers that I have as clients, we talk about this all the time, and love to be able to see the effectiveness. And it's in small ways, but it's also very, very important. Self-compassion has shown to improve mental health through reduction of anxiety symptoms, depression symptoms. It aids in executive functioning, especially also, there's executive functioning, and it's not just with neurodivergence or with ADHD, but it also is very, very helpful for clients who have ADHD. And overall, it's helpful for people in being able to take ownership of their own emotions and to experiences and how being able to understand how they are reacting or how they are responding or how they need or how they want to respond. It also it shows to help release of control, and through this is through a concept through what's called radical compassion, which is through Tara Brach. And it really, my paraphrase of it is that it's taking what feels uncomfortable and what we struggle with and being able to acknowledge what's in our control, what's not in our control, what we can do about it. It's not accepting, it's not saying I'm okay with what's happening. It's accepting the reality of what we can and what we can't do and releasing it too. And just even a little bit, I'm still working through it, but this is where, if you're familiar with Mel Robbins' let them theory, I know there's a lot out there, but I think that's what she's really getting at, is like when you let somebody and you're able to work through what's in your control and being able to do that or not do that, respond, not respond, and then acknowledging what's not in your control, you're going to see a reduction of that anxiety. And that's what Mel Robbins talks about specifically. When we let people, we're not trying to take control of the situation, or anxiety isn't heightened as much. And then also, it self-compassion helps to improve relationships because there's a lack of pressure on ourselves and on others, right? And that's where, again, that common humanity piece can come in and help us to be able to know that we're not alone, and to be able to extend compassion. There's a practice called the compassionate other, and being able to extend compassion to someone else while also being present with our own suffering. And it also allows ourselves to accept experience, to be able to accept compassion from other people and empathy, right? Because if you're learning and working on how to be kind to yourself, you're then able to then embrace it when other people try to, or they do extend compassion to you. And so, going through a couple of practices, these are the four that I feel like I use the most, have found to be the most effective. And I also want to be mindful of time as well. And so, the first one is how you would treat a friend. So, I'm going to kind of zip through this a little bit to give us an opportunity to practice. And then we're going to kind of move quickly, but you are more than welcome. I want you to be your own best teacher in this. And so, if you want to put it in the chat, as I ask questions, you are more than welcome to practice that common humanity of being together. Or you can write it down, or you can just think to yourself. Again, these practices like a simulation, because I would take far more time to do these. And so I'll jump right into the first one of how would you treat a friend? So, first, I want you to think about a time when a close friend was struggling, feeling bad about themselves. How did you respond to them? Especially when you were at your best. And this is where, if you want to put it in the chat, you can put it in the chat. If you want to think about it, you can think about it. If you want to write it down, you could write it down. But how did you respond to that person when you noticed that they were in pain or they were struggling or feeling bad about themselves? And then I want you to think about a time when you have felt bad about yourself and how you typically respond to yourself. And write that down and put it in the chat, whatever feels best for you, right? So, another friend is struggling, feeling bad about themselves, how you respond. When you are feeling bad about yourself, how you respond. I'm guessing you know where this is going to go, right? Did you notice a difference? Do you notice a difference on how you respond to yourself compared to someone else when they are suffering, when they're in struggle, when they are having a poor view of themselves? And I'll do this to sometimes I'll take it a little bit deeper, especially people who have kids. You know, how do you respond to your child? And if you were responding to yourself about a similar situation, how different would it be? And so this is really, it's helping you to be able to understand how kind or unkind you are to yourself, as well as being able to understand that common humanity piece of not being alone, and that common humanity piece, and then the mindfulness of being present as it's happening. And again, this would be something that on the low end, I'd probably take 5, 10, 15 minutes and we'd have some breathing, which I'll have you do here in a minute as well, just to really ground yourself in the experience. But again, for the sake of time. And then moving on to the self-compassion break, thinking of a moment right now as it's happening that you're struggling with that's difficult, but not too difficult. And so that also gets into in self-compassion. We don't want you to think about the deepest trauma that you've experienced in your life or a really, really hard situation that's going to make it more challenging to be able to really engage in a kind, compassionate way with that pain. And so being able to, with that situation in your mind, being able to say to yourself, whether in your mind or being able to say out loud, this is a moment of suffering. Another way to say it, this hurts, this sucks, this is stressful, ouch. And then being able to say suffering is a part of life. Other people are feeling this way. I'm not alone in this suffering. We all struggle, right? We see the difference. It's not putting a silver line around it. It's saying like, yeah, we are all in this together and it sucks and it's hard. And then the third piece is being able to say, may I be kind to myself? Thinking about what you need to hear, what you need to know, what you need to be reminded of. May I be kind to myself? May I give myself the compassion that I need? May I learn to accept myself as I am? May I forgive myself? May I be strong? May I be patient? And this is a practice, right? In the little outline of this is the goal of self-compassion is also to use it in your everyday life. All right. So this, I would say, this is, you could do this in 30 seconds or a minute. You could do it in 5 minutes. You could do it in 10 minutes. Um, However much time or space you feel like you need. There's also on Kristen Neff's website, there are videos and audio recordings of this. And so, and then there's also different mindfulness apps that you can utilize where you can decide, am I going to meditate for 5 minutes or 10 minutes? That are a great option. And then this one I'll have us engage and kind of slow down a little bit, which is supportive touch. So hand on heart. So this, you're in a moment of stress when you're struggling, and what I'll have you do now is just to take 2 deep, satisfying breaths. So you inhale through your nose, exhale, pushing it out through your mouth. Inhaling through your nose, exhaling through your mouth. And gently, if it feels comfortable for you, eyes open, eyes closed, placing your hand on your heart with gentle pressure and the warmth of your hand. Maybe put both hands, or you put one hand on your stomach, put both hands on your stomach, and hug on your face, whatever feels right for you. My favorite grounded place is for me, being my own best teacher, is one hand on my heart and one on my belly, focusing on your breath, feeling the natural rise and fall. And if this doesn't feel right, if it feels weird, stop what you're doing, right? We want it to be relaxing. We want it to help you to be present, right? Which is to be mindful in this moment as it's happening without judgment. So change it up. You can even put your hands on your face. Some people really like that one, or like lean. If it were not 78 degrees, almost 80 degrees and muggy, you could wrap yourself up in a blanket, unless maybe you keep your air conditioning at 60 degrees, then go for it. But really being able to gauge in a physical connection to ourselves in a comfortable, safe way. So bringing yourself back into this moment wherever you're at, whether your eyes are opened or if they're closed, opening them, bringing yourself back to this space, back to this presentation. And that right there, only a couple minutes. I didn't time it. Should have put a timer, but it can be as simple as that, being able to do that throughout your day. I have a colleague that will do this when they struggle with sleeping at night. And I remember when they first started doing this, they're like, okay, like we had all done like a compassion training and they were really struggling, very anxious. They did that for a couple minutes and they fell right back to sleep. Not a guarantee every time, but I always love to share that story because it's such a simple impact, and yet so important in helping us just to feel in tune and connected to ourselves, which, right, that's where you're that's where I can get into the zen, the woo-woo, the granola. I get that, and I work with that with clients too. So we work through that and find ways that it can feel comfortable. And again, you have to be your own best teacher. And so the final one, which I'm going to give more of an overview, is the identify need, want, or desire. And so this can happen through, again, utilizing your breath. And so what you'll do is you start to like focus on your breath, kind of get grounded into the practice. And then on the inhale, may I have, may I experience, and this is where I'll work with clients, or you can do it on your own of, what do you really feel like you need? What do you desire? It could be, may I have peace? May I have connection? May I have love? May I have comfort? May I have energy? Whatever that looks like for you. And so we'll focus on that for a little bit and still exhale through the mouth, pushing it out, inhaling what you need. And then after a few moments of exhaling and that metaphorical, what do you need to release through the exhale of the breath? So what do you need to get rid of? May I release anxiety? May I release stress, right? So then you're getting into this pattern of, may I have peace? May I release stress? May I have comfort? May I release disconnection? And again, all of those things in the practices can change, or for some people, they need that repetition and they need to um, reiterate those things to kind of get it into their brain, and then also getting it out, and then taking a moment just to be present, pulling yourself out of it, bringing yourself back to your breath naturally as it's happening, and then being able to notice the impact of being able simply to inhale what you need, exhale what you need to release. This is great at family functions. If any of you struggle with the social anxiety or with family members, is, may I have patience? May I release judgment? May I inhale love? May I exhale? May I release the need to be right? Like it can, again, you can create whatever it is that fits best for you. And so those are just four of many. And as I said, there's a list of resources. So selfcompassion.org. I mean, there's so many other resources out there, but it's even overwhelming for me when I was thinking about wanting to share. So start here. You can get an even deeper explanation of the outline of what self-compassion is all about, where Kristen Neff will go into it. That's where you can see the peer-reviewed research. There's different exercises, so they have outlines that you can do self or like outlines of guiding yourself. And then there's also guided videos or audio. All of this is free, which is just so incredible. I'm so, so grateful for this resource. And then it's also how you can get connected to the self-compassion community, which is a very big community. And as I've said, there's so many different trainings. And so that I'm going to skip ahead to that training. So there's professional and personal. So, if you want to do some of these, and I feel like for the cost of what they are, they really do try to keep it low just to allow access. And I'm trying to think, I don't know if they do scholarships or not, but it might be something that you could look into of like, I would love to learn more about this, but the finances just aren't there that reach out to them. They're very, very good at responding. They have a fantastic team that they work with, and I'm very grateful for through all of my training and experience. And then they also have a self-compassion scale, which is also in her book as well. But I love that there's an online scale that you can see just how compassionate or not compassionate you are towards yourself. So, um, yeah, so with that, I wanted to be mindful of time and we just wanted to make sure to see if there's any questions or any thoughts or anything else that I could go over. I know that's quite a bit and I could have shared a lot more, so wanted to give an opportunity for response. So,
Well, Nicole, can you hear me?
yeah.
I decided to take the headgear off. I was pinching my ears. But again, always tremendous
Hmm.
hearing you share. Um, Very timely, I think, for many of us, or at least for me.
Mhm.
This is couldn't have come at a better time.
Mm,
I've been checking the chat and the Q&A. Haven't seen a lot of questions out there, but we do have several people in the audience, participants. So I see a raised hand. Let's see. I'm going to just go ahead and turn your microphone on, Ginger.
yeah.
Go ahead if you want to unmute yourself and let's see.
Did I did I do it okay? Can you hear
Yeah.
me? Okay. Hi.
Hello.
This I appreciate you doing this and I got it across my email too. I appreciate being part of this and being welcomed into this community of self-compassion. I was just told today, because I sponsor women in addictions, and a lady at one of my 12-step groups told me just this today, you need to be nicer to yourself. She's like, quit being so hard on yourself. I mean, that's so funny that today of all days she said that.
Right? It's like that was like the preparation you needed of like, oh.
Like, I'm so glad I got on this webinar, and I really appreciate it. You had a lot of good stuff. I took a lot of notes because that's how I learn. I have to hear, write, and read. I
Mhm.
like to take notes so I can go back and it's like I can hear you saying all of this all over again when I take notes. But
Mhm.
recognizing the suffering, I can see if someone else is suffering and I try to be kind. But when I'm suffering, I feel it in my whole body.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Nicole, something that occurred to me is we say treat other people the way we want to be treated, but that's difficult when we treat ourselves so poorly.
Literally, one of the first things I remember turning to my colleague and going, wait a second, the golden rule, but like, we don't even think about how we want to be treated. And if we wanted to be treated the way, right, like, we wouldn't get treated very well, would we? Like, if we treat others the way that we want to be treated.
Right. Yeah, I think it's more like treat ourselves the way we want to treat others,
Yeah,
at least when we're in this helpful community.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Can you still hear me too?
Yeah,
Ginger.
Okay, I'll be done here in just a second. But yes, I love what you said too, Warren. Because yes, I understand mindfulness and being present, and I learned a lot of stuff through CBT and DBT. But I mean, I understand like the common humanity part about it. But what I'm really interested in is like this impact thing, practicing self-care without the guilt. We can't, like you said, you can't pour from an empty glass. I was taught like you can't help someone if your own backyard is parched. So I get it. Um, if you're emotionally bankrupt or spiritually bankrupt, you have nothing to give. So I really found that helpful too. That's all I have. Thanks.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Ginger.
And I'm sure, right, the common humanity, other people who heard you share part of your story are like, yep, I get that. I understand, right? And that piece, even you sharing is taking care of yourself, of simply, right, like that name it to tame it. Like you just tamed some of that by doing that. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
It's interesting also that you mentioned today's climate uh, throughout our society.
Yeah.
We have this business about taking vengeance on people, and um,
Yeah.
we even have war breaking out places. So we're you're talking about a whole different perspective on things, and maybe it does start with the way people treat themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, I would be curious, it'd be a whole other tangent of like, but how often, because a lot of what's happening is we're dehumanizing other people. And a lot of times I want to believe the best, it's not intentional, but it makes it a lot easier to be angry. It makes it a lot easier to, right, to like want to be vengeful and want um things to happen. But how often do we have to shut that down in ourselves and almost see ourselves, and again, I don't think it's conscious of not seeing ourselves as human. I know that's for myself when my anger secondary, there's primary anger, which is important, right? And especially with injustice and wrongs, and especially in the mental health community. um at the same time, I think we really have to be in tune and aware of ourselves. Of majority of the time, I would say, and again, I'm speaking from experience, of that secondary anger is on the forefront. And if I'm leading from that secondary anger, I'm not able to see myself or others as a human being. I'm not able to extend, as I said earlier, not able to extend compassion to others or to myself.
Yes, that's what they talk about, secondary aggressor too. Like the part you're talking about too, with how we can treat wrongdoers with compassion rather than condemnation. Exactly. That hit home right there because the wish I would have like defended myself in so many situations because I heard that you help people that have been in domestic violence, and this really, I'm so glad that I was able to get on this hour thing. Thank you. I'm gonna let somebody else talk. Thank you.
You're doing fine, Ginger. We really appreciate your comments. And Nicole, you're always good about sharing your material, and we recorded this
Yeah.
webinar so that other people can see it later.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
Make sure to have access to that and to be able to go back, and I can even share my outline on, I don't care. Like if you want even more of the details too. I just didn't want to put that can be overwhelming on putting all of that on slides. So
I think tremendously useful to people. I guess the last point that I tend to think about is I wonder how much things go back to the way that people were raised. Because I know that when I started working with youth at the Center for Mental Health, um, it was, the timeout thing, and just nonviolent crisis intervention. These are not the way kids were raised in the 60s. And if I go back even further, some of our leaders were brought up in the 30s and 40s. You know,
Yeah.
you know, we have, our leaders are people, and how were they taught to treat themselves? They were not taught to treat themselves with compassion.
Mhm.
They didn't, and so they don't treat other people with compassion.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so maybe if we,
how can you know what to do if you don't know, right? Or you don't learn or you don't teach yourself. You're set up for failure in that, which is really hard.
yeah, and so you do work with kids as well, don't you?
It like teenagers, like so probably 11, 12 is probably the lowest I go. So
Because I wonder if we should be teaching our children to treat themselves with compassion.
Mhm.
oh, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Nicole, for your talk. I know um, can you tell us a little bit more about resources? Where can people find more information?
I would say, like, literally just go to selfcompassion.org and just scour her website, read her book, Self Compassion. I would say she also has Fear Self Compassion too, which she goes over the tenets. And Fear Self Compassion is more, again, more of that boundary. Like, she is so funny and it's so quirky, but she has this exercise where she's like, stand strong. No, like, but being able to do it compassionately. And so that's where, like, if people feel as if they need more of that, I would suggest just reading Fear, Self-Compassion. I've read both. But if you're not a huge reader or it's hard for you to get through a book, then do that. But if you just like want to focus on really understanding self-compassion and more of the gentle, warm response, then I would focus on just reading or going through self-compassion. So yeah.
Well, and how can people get in touch with you if they want to uh, maybe explore doing therapy with you or anything like that? Is that something that are you accepting new clients?
Not at this point. I'm actually 7 months pregnant. I'm due in August.
Oh,
So yeah, so
congratulations. Mr. and Mrs. Didier.
but I'll be back October, November and kind of reassessing. I do have an intern under me that is taking clients, and so there is that opportunity to still kind of be connected in that way, but still like feel free to reach out. I would say the easiest and quickest way to get in touch with me is if you go to Psychology Today, and then just look up my name, Nicole Didier, LCSW. You can send me a message. You can call me. Um, and yeah, so I would say that's the quickest, most efficient way. And I'm also on social media too. I mean, if it's for therapy, then no, but if it's for like professional connections, then yes. So,
Right.
Congratulations.
So what she said is not like on Cora's Online Digest.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Well,
Like the yellow pages for therapists. Yep.
wow. I imagine this self-compassion could probably be very helpful for your baby. uh,
Absolutely. 100%. My husband numerous times, especially during the second trimester, was like, "Are you okay? Like, yeah. Are you tired? No.
Mhm.
Feeling right. I'm calm. I'm relaxed." And he's like, "I almost felt like I just needed to mess with you. Like, 'cause you're just so calm." And so
We're zen, yeah.
that's not my natural, that is not my natural inclination or response. Like it has been a practice. And so it's being tested in the third trimester, especially this heat. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm already like sweating and yeah.
No, what your husband's trying to tell you is you have that pregnancy glow. That's a good compliment.
Wonderful. Well, I hope that everyone else got as much out of this presentation as I did. I feel so calm now. Thank you.
So glad. I'm
Even
excited.
in the midst of the storm. Um, this could not have come at a better time. I somehow, uh, I don't know if the universe knew that I needed this today,
Mhm.
but I did. And I appreciate you so much, Nicole. Thank you so much for doing this and,
Yeah.
uh, and for sharing. Thank you, everybody who participated. And we'll see you next time on Leading the Conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.